Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 622. I had the white pieces and played d4. Opponent went d5 and I go for the Queen's Gambit with c4. My opponent declines with c6. You see that's one of actually the top choice. The top three moves are all c6, they're all pawn moves. c6, e6 are taking the accepted, Queen's Gambit accepted. But c6, the Slav, very popular defense. Now I go knight f3. It's the main move, and it also prevents black from playing the win-hour gambit with e5. So just clamp down on that, and then I developed the other knight. Usually, actually, I play with e3. I'm not sure exactly what I was thinking at this point during the game, because this does allow some interesting possibilities here after black takes. Taking is the main line of the Slav. If you play e6, that's going into the semi-Slav. But if you take the pawn and then develop the bishop out to f5, that would be a mainline Slav. And then there's also other variations where black tries to hold on to that pawn and push these queenside pawns forward, which is why I usually avoid this particular defense here, or not defense, this particular way of playing with knight to f3 here. I usually get in that e3 move first. Anyway, my opponent plays a very rare move, bishop to g4 here. And I didn't respond in the best way. Something you should always think about when this bishop comes out here to put pressure on your knight before you've moved any of these pawns. There's no actual pin here, and so that knight is free to move, and hopping the knight into a center square like this. Let's go ahead and put it on the board there, is often a good idea. Harassing that bishop, and the bishop drops back to this square. You can go ahead and take in the center, and there's already a whole bunch of tactics starting to pop up here. For example, if the knight takes the pawn, you have e4. And even if pawn takes pawn, you also have e4, because it opens up this line for the bishop to come out and deliver a check after pawn takes pawn. And that check is pretty annoying with the knight here already on e5. So there's actually lots of tactics in this position already, starting with this, well, because of this centralized knight here that you got with tempo because of his bishop g4 move. So the bishop g4 in this position is actually a real mistake. And then there's a second idea here, which happens if we back up. You see that bishop g4 as well as bishop f5, which you will often see as well. They're both mistakes in this position for another reason, and that is the idea of the queen coming out to b3. So if you play the queen out to b3, okay, yeah, it's not in the opening book, but it puts pressure on this diagonal, and it also attacks the undefended b pawn. That's the problem with this early departure of the bishop. And now, if the queen is involved in defending the d pawn, and if it comes up to try and defend the b pawn as well, you can hop in with knight e5 and chase the queen away. So it's let's erase some of these arrows. It's pretty tricky. The normal move here to try and stay in the game for black is queen b6, and then the chess engine gives this line. You just trade, and you take on d5. Keep taking until you get this situation with these isolated doubled pawns. Let's say the line continues with knight e5, harassing the bishop. But the main idea is that you've inflicted a lot of structural damage on your opponent here now that he has these isolated doubled pawns, and these will be targets that you can go after the rest of the game. So that's the second reason why this early bishop deployment is a mistake. But I didn't take advantage of that. I just played e3, getting back into a position that I'm familiar with. And now he plays e6, the semi-Slav. And now with this solid defense of the center pawn here, queen to b3 is no longer a double attack. This pawn is well defended, so it's easy for black to deal with the threat to the b pawn. So everything is okay at this point. White still has a slight opening edge, but nothing great here. We continue with some normal developing moves. I castle to unpin my knight, and just because I want to castle, and he takes. And now this is a mistake too. So once again, this gives me a pretty big advantage. He's just giving up the bishop pair for no compensation. These doubled pawns are not going to stay doubled because I'm going to trade one off and then push the other one forward. So these doubled pawns, in fact, are more of a strength than a weakness because they give me more center influence. So black has given up the bishop pair, and he hasn't really inflicted any structural damage by way of compensation. He does hop in here with the knight to e4. It's a good active post. I go queen c2, and then he castles. A lot of times players will go for f5 in this position to kind of cement this knight into that spot, then castle, and then prepare to push that f-pawn forward, get some kingside attack going. That might be interesting. Anyway, he castled. I took. And if black wants to continue with these ideas, he needs to take back with the pawn. I think either one is okay. When I looked at it with the engine, they were both evaluated about the same, although in a way the more natural move is to take with the e-pawn so that this bishop has an easy escape if it needs to run away. It's got a good diagonal there to retreat along. If you take with the c-pawn, though, maybe that's more consistent with this idea of pushing the f-pawn forward and trying to soften up the center while using this pawn to support the knight. So either of those would be fine. He took it with the queen, and actually this move he's in big trouble after this move. And I start out okay. I play c4 and I push his queen away. And what I didn't really notice, though, is that this knight is kind of precarious here. Nothing is defending it but the queen. So the queen only has one move. So queen f5 was forced. And now there's a complicated tactical sequence here. I called it, let's see, a tactic here, but it's not so simple. In fact, the main line doesn't end up winning material. But there's lots of tactical possibilities here. So if you want to pause the video at this point and see if you can discover some of the ideas in this position, it's pretty interesting to look at. See if you can find a good and provocative move from white. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. Whether this is the best move or not is actually a matter of debate, because as the chess engine evaluates it more deeply, there's lots of stuff going on. But certainly one of the candidate moves here is knight to h5, and something I didn't really consider very long during the game, but I really should have. So it's kicking the queen, and the queen has no squares to go to defend the knight, but the queen can counterattack my knight. And then if I grab his knight, oh no, let's see, I have to do this in the right order, because also my bishop is hanging. There's two pieces hanging now, the knight's hanging and the bishop's hanging. But you can play f3, and that forks these two pieces. And so this is interesting. How does black proceed in this position? If black grabs the knight, this is actually a big mistake, because after queen takes knight, even though the material is even at this point, this bishop is pinned. The queen is loose here, and I'm threatening to take the bishop. So that wins material. So taking the knight is not good at this point. In fact, black has to retreat the knight. And this is the main line. And then after pawn takes bishop, then he can take the knight. And then this was the computer line, g3, kicking the queen back to h6 here. And looks like kind of a crazy position. There's certainly still threats on this position, but we've gone on long enough, and apparently black can still wriggle and squirm. But I mean, the threats include pushing this pawn forward and forking these two pieces with this pawn. But it's not clear that white is going to end up winning material. But white has the bishop pair, good central control, and a winning position right here. So that would have been a pretty interesting way to play with that knight h4 move. Anyway, I just played h3, kicking his bishop. I took back, and then he went with his knight to g5, I guess putting some pressure on my bishop and exposing my queen to an attack. And so I just have to trade queens here. I don't see anything else. And I was concerned about this intermediate move, knight takes with check, but of course now I can take back with the queen. So that just loses a queen for black. So he has to take my queen, and then that gives me time to retreat my bishop. So the result of that sequence was still pretty good for me. Material is even, but I have the bishop pair against the knight pair. I have good central control, and he has these doubled pawns that are weak and I can play against. So this gives me a good game. Let's see, he plays knight d7 here. Go bishop d3, targeting this pawn. And I really was expecting him to defend it. I mean, it does create holes in his position, so I can understand why he might have been reluctant to play a move like g6. I could put my bishop here and try and take advantage of the dark squared weaknesses. But this move here is certainly asking for trouble. I could already play f3 right away. I played bishop b2 first. Let's see, he went rook a to d8, and then I went f3. And this basically wins the pawn. He can hop in here, knight g3, hitting my rook. My mistake here was I should have moved the rook to d1, and it's because of what happened in the game, actually. There's this pin, which I wasn't paying attention to. There's this pin along the d file, so if I bring my rook over to d1, then I'm defending the bishop. And so that's the way to play this. I went to e1, thinking I might want to push the e-pawn forward, but neglecting this. And then he hops in with knight to c5, taking advantage of the pin. But he had an even better move in knight to e5. He hops in this way. He's hitting my bishop, and he's also hitting the c-pawn, which is defended by the bishop. So I can't retreat. In the game, I played bishop to c2 when he went knight to e5. But here I can't play that. That would just drop a pawn. So I have to defend with the rook. And then he can trade off one of my bishops, so I don't have the bishop pair anymore. And this is a position that black can play. It's not down material. I still have more central control, so I still have an advantage. But black is close to equalizing there. Anyway, he went knight c5, which keeps me in the game, or keeps my advantage. I can now just drop my bishop back to c2, and he has to move the knight again. He went to e6. And now I bring my king up to harass his knight, and he can't defend that pawn. He has to drop back and lose the pawn. So now I'm finally up material. More than just the bishop pair, I'm up a pawn. And should be on my way to winning, but there's still more wrinkles coming up. Let's see, he played b6 here. I brought my other rook to d1. He went g6, kicking my bishop. I dropped back to b1. Yeah, he might have been better off playing g6 first in this position instead of b6. If he played g6 first, it would force my bishop to retreat. Well, I guess I would go to c2. I just wouldn't want to block the rook in. But the way he played it, I can bring my bishop all the way to the back rank, defending the a-pawn and still staying on this good diagonal, not keeping my rook blocked in on the back rank. Okay, bishop b1, he went knight to c7. And now I went d5, and d5 is an outright mistake. So I don't know what I was thinking here. But there are still a couple of different ways to play this. But first of all, let's show what I should have played. I should have played bishop e4 immediately. Let's cancel that. Bishop e4. And now if he goes, he's got to do something about this pawn. If he tries to defend it with the rook, I guess I can keep harassing him. Can chase the rook around with the bishop or the pawn. Anyway, the chess engine gives c5 is the best way to play this. I take, he takes, and then g4 kicking this knight. The knight has to go to g7 and go to f6 because of the bishop, and then bishop to f6. And you can see this bishop here is going to be a thorn in the side of black for quite a while. So anyway, that would be the best way to play. d5 is a mistake, and he just takes that, and I just have not got enough defenders for that pawn. I totally miscounted there. But there is a tactical way to kind of save things here. So if you want to spot another good move at this point, go ahead and pause the video here and think about it. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. There's an intermediate move. Instead of just recapturing the pawn immediately, I can bring this bishop out and attack his knight. So he's got two pieces that are covering the d5 square. But if he moves the rook to defend the knight, I can just trade it off and then take that pawn. So this saves the pawn. The chess engine actually gives knight I forget what it was, but anyway, yeah, knight to a6 seems like a weird move, but he gives some knight move here. Maybe knight to e6 would be an idea, and then I grab the pawn, so I stay a pawn up, and so that's the way to salvage this position. After I take, he just grabs the pawn here, and we're back once again to where I'm only a little bit better. I still have the advantages that we talked about previously with the oh, I didn't take right away. Yeah, the engine liked taking. I played g4 kicking. He drops the knight back to g7. I still have the advantages of the bishop pair, but the material is even. Actually, I've lost my center control too, so my only remaining advantage really is the bishop pair here. And let's see, I went bishop e4, harassing his rook. And if he were to play rook to a5, that was the engine suggestion, forcing me to defend the a-pawn, then suddenly black is nearly equal once again. Even though I have the bishop pair, black's pieces have sprung to life. So anyway, I was a little bit lucky that he just traded the rook here, his active piece. And that's kind of a mistake you can think about in general principles. You don't want to trade off your active pieces. And if you look at the position after the trade, then my rook has been activated. My bishops are active, and his rook is still not participating. So the remaining pieces that are left on the board after the trade, my pieces are more active than his. So it was a bad trade for him. Anyway, he went knight g to e6, getting his knights into the game. You go bishop to e5, just trying to activate those, keep the bishops active and try and put pressure on his knights. He went f6, kicking my bishop. I dropped back to g3, staying on this diagonal, looking at his knight. And now I went f5. So f5 is a mistake, similar to my mistake. Actually, no, he's got it counted out correctly. It's a mistake because of a slightly deeper reason, and it's because of what happened in the game. So I guess I'll just go on with it. He pushed on with f5. I take, he takes, and that forces me to move my bishop away. And then he pushes on to f4, which is the idea. I mean, this pawn is going to be weak here. So I guess the reason why it's a mistake is that he's now created a couple of isolated pawns here that are weak and I can attack. So his idea was to push on right away. And now I take back. And he actually can't take that pawn. He has to do something else. So the chess engine is suggesting knight to c5 and just staying a pawn down. Knight to c5, and I can push on with f5. So that move involved a pawn sacrifice, which he probably didn't realize when he played it. But the problem is that after knight takes f4, I have this bishop b3 check, which I played, and this forces his king to an unfortunate position. If he goes king to h8, which he didn't play, the same tactic happens as happened in the game. King to h8, I first take the knight to pull the rook away from the back rank, and then I have a pair of checks here. A check here, the king comes forward, and a check here. And my bishop, that's why bishop b3 was an important part of this, is controlling the blocking square, so his rook can't come back and block and defend the knight. So he just loses a piece here. And he loses a piece in all the variations. So it's kind of interesting. Let's see, he took, I went bishop b3 check, and he went king g7 immediately rather than trying to delay things with king h8. But once again, this rook d7 check wins a piece. So yeah, there's just nothing to do about it. It might have been more effective for me. Oh, I went ahead and took the knight off at this point and then grabbed the knight. So I'm just up a bishop and the same number of pawns. And nothing too terrible happened after this. He tried to play some tricks, but nothing really was working. And I never gave up the advantage. So at a certain point, right here when I traded rooks and pushed the h-pawn, then he resigned. So anyway, interesting game. Hope you guys like this video. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.